The moment I wore this dress, I felt like I was a queen. This is so beautiful. I think I did a really good job actually. The only difference is the length of the dress. I didn't have enough fabric for it, but every other thing is just perfect. Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'll be showing you how to sew this really beautiful dress with an asymmetric neckline. I'm sure you're going to love this video, so just keep watching. This is the fabric that I use for this dress. I have two different fabric right here. The black fabric is a crepe fabric and you'll be needing 1.5 yard if you want a full length. While for the white fabric, it's a 1 yard of lacquer fabric. In my previous video, I showed how to draft a bustier pattern, so you might need to start from that video before watching this one. At this point, I've gone ahead to place my pattern on the fabric and I've cut for the center front. I cut it on fold and I added 1/2 inch all round. For the side fronts, I did not add any allowance to the armhole and to the side seam, while for the center back, I added 1 inch to the center back and then 1/2 inch on the other side. And then for the yoke, I added 1/2 inch all round, but I did not add any allowance to the armhole area. And then I cut 2 pieces for both pattern, one for the lining and one for the main fabric. At this point, I'll just move the pattern and I'll sew using 1/2 inch sewing allowance for both sides. When you sew, you turn it to the right side and you top stitch. For the back yoke, I cut 4 pieces, that is 2 for allowance and 2 for lining. And then I'll just join it using 1/2 inch sewing allowance at that point. So now for the sleeve, I have a piece of fabric here that I placed on fold. The length of the fabric is dependent on how long you want the sleeve to be, and the width of it is about 12 inches. So I've drawn a straight line from the top of the fabric. So from this point now, I'm just going to measure my bust measurement, divide it by 12, and then you add 1.5 inches to it. For example, if your bust measurement is 38, divide it by 12, that is 3.1, and if you add 1.5, that is 4.6 inches thereabout. Mine is 4.25 inches, which is my crown depth measurement. The next measurement is take from your shoulder down to your chest line. I got 7 inches, so I'm just going to be marking that 7 inches on this point, and I'll add 1 inch for sewing allowance. So the next thing now is I'm going to place my tape rule from the center of the fabric to the 7 inches that we marked earlier. So I'll just arrange it like that, and then I'll find the midpoint of this and I'll mark it there. So from that midpoint, I'll go up by 1/2 inch, and then from here I'll just use my chalk to connect it like so. It's not very visible, but it's just basically drafting out the crown depth of a sleeve pattern. So if you have your own pattern for sleeve, just use the same sleeve pattern and connect. The main thing is the length of the sleeve that you are going to be using. Make sure it's very, very long. Like right here, I'm using about 30 inches. So at this point now, from the length of the sleeve, so from that length, I'm just going to be marking 12 inches. The 12 inches is how wide I want the sleeve to be. So you can use more than 12 inches if you want the sleeve to be very, very full. So at this point, I'll just connect it all the way down to the length of the sleeve, like so. And then by the time you're done, you just cut it off. And that's basically all. We are done with the drafting of the sleeve. So now when you open it up, this is what it looks like. So I'll just take it to the sewing machine and I'll hem the edge and also the down part of it. So for the skirts of this, for the down part of the dress, I've placed my fabric on fold like so, and I'm going ahead to draw a straight line about 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric, and then I'll also draw 1/2 inch on the other side as well. The reason why I'm marking 1/2 inch, we are drafting the front part of the skirt, and the front skirt is not on fold, so I'm marking 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. So the length of fabric is dependent on how long you want it to be. From that point, I'm going to be marking my hip line measurements, which is 8.5 inches. Next, I'm going to mark my knee line, or where I want the slit to start from. I used about 18 inches thereabouts. Now I'm just going to connect it, drawing a straight line like so. Sorry, that part is not showing. I didn't know about that. So on the length of this dress, remember, if yours is long, that means you should go all the way down. You're going to draw a straight line as well there. So this is the length of the dress for mine. Yours can be longer than this. From this point, I'm just going to be marking quarter of my waist measurements plus 1 inch sewing allowance. While on the hip line, I'll mark quarter of my hip measurements plus 1 inch sewing allowance. And then on the length of, on that knee line, or where I want the slit to start from, I'm going to minus 1.5 inches from quarter of my hip line measurements, and then I'll add sewing allowance to it. So from here, I'll just connect it from the waistline all the way to the hip line, and then down to the length of the dress as shown. So for the length of the dress, depending on how long yours is, so you're just going to mark exactly what you have on the knee line, and then you just connect it to the length of the dress. At this point, I reduced it by half an inch, or was it 1 inch? I reduced it by 1 inch, but I later adjusted it to half an inch because I wanted the slit to be a little bit closed. So I'm just going to place the front pattern on another piece of fabric like so, and I'll make sure that the center back is half an inch longer than the center front. So I left half an inch extra for the center back, and then I'll just cut exactly what I have on the front pattern. So by the time you're done cutting, you're going to remove the front from the back, and then from about 8 inches, you're going to sew using 1 inch sewing allowance all the way down to the length of the dress for the back. While for the front, you're going to sew from the waistline down to where you want the slit to start from. So this is the front pattern, and this is the back pattern. This is what it should look like. Now I'm just going to be working on the bustier. I'll open it up, and this is what it looks like. And then at this point now, we're just going to join the center front to the side front using half an inch sewing allowance. So I'll just join both sides. Then for the back, I'm just going to be taking the dart. So I'll trace out the darts that I added while drafting the pattern. I'll take it, and then this is what it looks like for the front, and this is what it looks like for the back by the time you're done. And then for the yoke, I've closed it with the lining, and I've also sewn it all around like so, and this is what it looks like. So I'll just cut off that allowance that we have there, and then now I'm just going to be joining both sides together like so. Make sure it's about half an inch. The left side is joining the right side at about half an inch, so you just sew it. By the time you're done sewing, this is what it should look like. So the distance from that point is half an inch sewing allowance. So when you're done, you're just going to place the yoke on the bustier. So make sure you notch the midpoint first, and then when you notch the midpoint, you're going to join it like so using half an inch sewing allowance. So after joining, this is what it should look like. I'll also do the same thing for the back as well. So you can cut off the excess allowance that we have there. So at this point, I've also joined for the lining as well, and I'll turn it to the right side, and I'll sew using half an inch sewing allowance and top stitch it. While for the back, I'm just going to join it using half an inch sewing allowance like so, and I will join the lining as well using half an inch sewing allowance. So when you turn it to the right side, by the time you're done, this is what it should look like. And now I'm just going to close it using 0.25 inch sewing allowance. While for the back, I will just turn it to the wrong side and I will sew using 0.25 sewing allowance. So by the time you're done, this is what it should look like. So now I'm just going to determine the midpoint of the center front of the front bodice, and I'll be joining it to the midpoint of the skirts like so. So use half an inch sewing allowance. So for the back, I'll do the same thing, joining it using half an inch sewing allowance. So at this point, I'm done with the back. I'll just add my zip to this at this point. So by the time you're done joining the front, this is what it looks like. I've also gone ahead to close the slits at that point. I sewed very close to the edge of the slits. So now I'm just going to measure the distance for the slits. I have about 10 inches there. So I have another piece of fabric here that I'll be using for the closed slit. And the length of it is 12 inches, while the width of it is about 27 inches. I later reduced it to 20 inches because it was just too long. So now I'm just going to join it at that, join the white fabric to the sewing allowance at that point, like so. So when you join it, this is what it should look like. Remember to notch the midpoint of the white fabric. So when you mark it, you're just going to arrange it at the middle of the fabric. You're going to arrange it, join it to the midpoint of the slit like so. And then at this point, you're going to pleat it as I'm showing you. So after pleating, you're just going to take it to the sewing machine and you sew at that point. So by the time you're done sewing, this is what it looks like. Now I'm just going to be joining the back to the front at the shoulder line. So from the shoulder, I'm just going to join it using 1 inch sewing allowance. Please use 1 inch instead of the half an inch that we left earlier. So at this point, I also join the side seam of the front to the side seam of the back. And when you turn it to the right side, this is what it should look like. So after that, I'm just going to be joining the sleeve to this dress. And at this point, make sure you have hemmed all round hem the sleeve all round. So you're just going to be joining it just the way you join your sleeve to the dress. You just join it, but this time around you're not going to be closing it at the side seam. That's basically all for today's tutorial. Thanks for watching. Bye.